Guys, in this video, I'm going to be taking this toy grade RC Magnetron monster truck and turning it into something a lot more realistic, but this time a little bit cheaper. Want to make some extra cash so you can buy more toys, quit your job, go on more holidays, or maybe build a monster truck? I've got you covered. Check out my course in the description and I'll show you how to make 100k profit a year. So this thing here is completely toy grade. There's no suspension. I'm going to plug it in a minute and show you what that does. But I want to convert it into something a little bit better. So these are a couple of Gravedigger builds that I've already done. This was the first one and this was brushed. And then the second build, I made this one brushless and also slightly longer wheelbase. But as these get better and better, they are becoming more and more expensive. And I've heard loads of comments of people saying, I want to build one. So I've done a build guide of these ones and there's going to be a link to that there. But for those of you that want to build one that is almost as good, but a lot cheaper, then hopefully this video is going to help. Just switch it on and give you a quick demo. So steering, all or nothing. Nothing in between. No suspension. Power-wise, the same. All or nothing. Alright, let's see how it jumps. Oh, tumble wumble. So next here we have the modified one. Just like a real monster truck, front and rear solid axles. We've got 4-link suspension. That means we get full suspension travel. We have front and rear wheel steering that we can do independently on the controller. Alright, here we go. Oh! Tumble wumble! Oh no! Broke it! Drive shaft shot out! If you have a little look here, it's got a plastic little UJ inside, and I've already modified the inner joints to a metal inside. So I'll do this to the outers and then we should be good to go again. So there we go, all fixed again. Just put a metal UJ in there. Anyway, now we're going to go on to the Magnetron. So many people have asked me to build them one of these, but the thing is that they're quite expensive. It's probably about £200-300 or dollars worth of parts that's in this build, then plus all the time putting it together. So if I was to build these for people, they would be very expensive. So click the link up here. Have a go at building your own, or if you want to build a cheaper version, then this is what this video is going to be about. So to keep the costs down, we're going to be using slightly less components. So I'm going to be basing the build on one of these here, the RGT Adventurer. I'm going to put a link to all of this stuff down below that I'm using. So I've already removed the transmission and I've already removed the axles. So this is what we're going to be putting onto this car here. Servo-wise, I'm going to be using another one of these Tower Hobby servos here, but this time we're only going to do front wheel steer. We're not going to have any rear wheel steer. Speed controller wise, we're going to use this cheapo brushed speed controller here that can do, I think, 2S LiPo, and we're going to be running the stock motor on 2-cell LiPo too. Now it is pushing it a little bit, and if you let these get too hot then it will burn out, but we keep trying to keep the cost low. You could run it on 1-cell LiPo and it's going to be a bit slower, but in this build we're just going to focus on building this into a hobby grade RC car, but on a budget. And by the way, I'd love to see some of your guys' builds. If you guys have built any, then put some links down below. I'd love to see what you guys can come up with. So first things first, we need to get the body off. And the easiest way to get the body off is just to cut these little clips here. And you've got 4 of those, 1 in each corner. And then you should be able to give it a little wiggle and a little tug. And you should be able to get this main section here away from the main toy. So another thing I'm going to do on this one to try and keep the cost down is use the wheels that actually come with this. On these two other wheels, I used the wheels from one of these Spin Master toys here because they look a little bit more realistic and a little bit more scale. But when you're trying to cut some costs and save some money, then sometimes you do have to cut a few little minor corners. So there we go, we've got the wheels off, we've got the body and the chassis off, and this is all we need from the toy. So next we can remove the chassis from the body. I mean, myself, I'm not really a fan of these 3D bodies, but unfortunately, when you get one of these Spin Master toys, I only really do the Gravedigger, the Monster Mutt, and the Magnetron. And I love the Gravedigger, I love all the more realistic looking trucks, but when it comes to these sort of kiddie looking 3D ones, I'm not really such a fan. But that's all they're giving us, so that's what I've got to run with. So the chassis on this is way too wide at the bottom. Even if you have a look at a real monster truck, you'll see that the bottom half of the chassis and the front is a lot narrower than it is on here. If we look at this, it's just way, way, way too wide. So here's a full-size monster truck that I'm building. And as you can see, when you look at the cab is a lot wider. And then the sort of the front end, and if you look down here where the cradle is, it all kind of narrows down a little bit. And then you can see that I kind of replicated that on this Gravedigger here. As you can see, look, the bottom here, a lot narrower. The front here, it's been narrowed down quite a lot. And I haven't done it just for the looks. I've done it for functionality too. Because once we slide these axles under, there needs to be room to mount the shock absorbers. And this chassis is just so wide that there's just no room to put the shocks. So we have to narrow all this lot down. So I'm going to start off with by cutting these pieces off here. Now keep hold of these because we are going to be using them again a bit later on in this build. We're going to be gluing a lot of these bits back on. So there's a few more pieces that I need to shave off. So I need to lose these parts here. And then I need to shave down these fake shock absorbers to make room for the real shock absorbers. Because if you don't, they're going to end up rubbing on there. So I'm going to do that off camera, and then I'm going to put you back on. Alright, so I shaved it off here. I shaved off these little pieces here. We may need to shave off more later on. And then off camera, I've just drilled out this bottom cradle here so that we can fit this transmission. And the easiest way to line it up is, I used a body reamer and just made a hole. See this tube here, right next to the exhaust? Just put a hole just underneath that tube there, look. I used a body reamer just to kind of mark it, to mark the centre first. And then I got a drill bit and just drilled that all the way through like that. And then I took this chassis that the gearbox came from, and if you line that up with that hole there, so I put that there like that, and then drilled through it, that kind of marks all the holes. So now all the holes are perfectly spaced. So now we can get the transmission, slide them in like that, and there we go. So next I'm just going to bolt these axles back onto the cradle. So there we go, it's starting to look like something. So this one's going to be running a slightly shorter wheelbase than these two. That's because I'm using the stock front links here, look. This one here's got the longer links on the rear, but when we have a look at my brushless one, I've got the longer links front and rear. But it is perfectly lining up with these fake shock absorbers, so it should look pretty good. There it is with the wheels just kind of chilling there for a minute, and with the body show on. Yeah, I don't think that's going to look too bad. So next we've got to now mount the top 4 link bars. So I've just clipped these back on. These are the stock ones that came with the RGT Adventurer. So next I've just marked a little hole here that I'm going to make. I'm going to give you the measurements of that in a sec. And then coming onto the rear, I've got to find a way where I can mark the rear ones too. So probably going to go on there somewhere like that. So I'm going to have a little play about, have a little measure up, make some holes. And then when I've got all the geometry correct, then I will measure it up for you guys and show you where you've got to make the holes. So I like to mark the centre of where I'm going to drill with one of these body reamers. I suppose you could use anything pointy, I suppose, just to make a little divot. And then we can carefully drill through. Then a ball link. And then I'm just going to screw it into the inside like this. Do the same to the other side, and then we can clip it all on. Alright, boom. There we go. It's all on there. Now, having these massively longer bottom links and having these shorter top links, and then where the geometry is, it would have been nicer to mount this a little bit lower. But if you mount it too much lower, then it's going to have the wrong angle. But if you move that up and down, you can kind of see that axle angle is changing, and we don't really want that. I'm going to leave it as it is for now, because this is supposed to be a budget build. But ideally, what I'm probably going to do later on is I'm going to make a new hole further up and make some longer links out of something like Devastator, because then I can make them custom length. I'm making them any length that I want, and we can get it so we've got the perfect geometry. But for now, that's going to get it working. It's going to keep it cheaper. Actually, I just made a small adjustment. I just moved it down a little bit. So it has helped it. Still not perfect, but I think we're going to run with that. So if you're wondering on the measurement, if you measure from this part of the cage here to that ball joint there, we are looking at 17mm. That's on the front. So now we're going to move on to the rear. I'm going to see where I can mount this, and then once I've figured it out, we'll put you back on. All right, boom, there we go. All the links are on, both axles fully mounted now. If you want to know the distance, then I measured from here, look, in this little corner piece here, and then here to the centre of where you've got to make the hole. Now, these little verniers here are a perfect device for measuring, because you can kind of lay one end where it's got to go like this, and then you can kind of pivot the other end to make a little mark, so then you know where you can kind of make a little centre mark. So I'm going to put a link to one of these down below. This was only cheap, it didn't cost that much, but when you're doing these little DIY projects, I mean, these are just like essential to have. Even when it comes down to measuring ball joints and stuff, because some of these are like 3.8mm, some of them are 4mm. So I mean, any custom project, I mean, these are going to be essential. So next we've got to mount the shocks. Now these shocks come from the RGT as well. Remember, I'm trying to use as many parts from the RGT as possible, just to keep this project as cheap as possible. So I've just screwed the shocks back on. It took me a couple of attempts to get them where I like them. On these axles here, the shocks are mounted behind, whilst if we look at the axles on the Devastator, the shocks are mounted on top. So I've had to do the shock positionings a little bit differently. But on the front, I've mounted a shock on that rear fake accumulator thingamajig, or whatever it's called. And we're looking at around about 9mm. And then on the rear, from here to here, we're looking at around about 11.5mm. But in any case, you can mount the shocks where you like. I'll just kind of set it up so that these bottom arms are sitting fairly level. So put your axles so they're sitting relatively level, and then just put the shocks where you want to put them. And next, we can put the drive shafts back on. So next, I'll put a couple of cable ties around the frame here. This is try and narrow it down a little bit. We're going to glue some pieces in here later. That's going to keep it there. The same here on the rear, just to give a little bit of clearance to the shocks to stop them rubbing on the frame. So next, I've removed the battery door from the old car, put a hole in each corner. So now I can cable tie or zip tie that into the floor like this. So there we go, got the floor mounted in there now. So now we've got space to mount the ESC. I'm going to do that off camera. I've got to do a bit of soldering. I want to take the case off of this and take it out, just so I've only got the circuit board there about with the case to it. Then I'm going to direct solder these motor wires directly to this board. So there we go, speed controller in, the motor wires directly soldered to the board, look. Don't forget, link to this speed controller down below. Next, we're going to install the receiver. So I'm going to be using this receiver here, which is from a HBI car. The only reason I'm using this is because I have it laying around, not doing anything, and the receiver's fairly small. Now, if I was to buy one, then I would buy this one here. This is a Dumbo RC 6-channel. These are dirt cheap. It's around about £25, $25, something like that, roughly. And this is one of the best, cheaper transmitters that I've ever seen. Now, this is actually the transmitter that I use on my Traxxas X01, because this car can do 100 miles an hour. And the plan is to race that against the Lambo on the quarter-mile track. So we need a radio that's got a big range and has a good connection to the car. So the radio it came with, the Traxxas radio, it went out of range way too early. Then I put on a Spectrum system, this one here, and that went out of range as well. So people said to me, get this cheapo Banggood Special. So I did. And this is the only one so far that I've used that can actually drive the full entire range that I need this thing to go. Also, this is 6 channels. It's got a receiver with a built-in gyro, so you can use the gyro, or you can't, you don't have to. You've got a toggle switch here, so you could use this for rear steer if you wanted to use it on like a 4-wheel steering build. So if you're looking for a cheap radio that is going to be suitable for most RC scenarios, and you want it cheap, then this is going to be the one. It even feels relatively well made. You know, compared to the HBI one, quality-wise, they feel about roughly the same. So anyway, if you want to know where you can get one of these from, there's going to be a link down below. So I'm going to install this receiver into here now, plug it all in, and then I'll put you back on when it comes to see if it works or not. All right, so there we are, all plugged in. So throttle. Yes, look at that. Steering servo. Nice. Actually, something else that I want to do, I'm going to cut this switch off of here. It's quite big, quite bulky, so all I've got to do is cut it off, solder the wires together, and it's going to be permanently on. So next, I'm just trying to mount up the servo. So I've put the steering arm back on. I've actually got a servo saver here, and this is a servo from one of these HBX Devastators. Now, the FTX, whatever it's called, is pretty much the same truck, so you can buy a servo saver from FTX that should fit this servo. Alternatively, you could just not bother with a servo saver, but I prefer servo savers. It makes servos just last a little bit longer. So next, I need to get this servo up in between the chassis rails. And on this build here, there's less room than with the previous one because these axles are slightly narrower, which brings the shocks further in. So I've had to sort of compress these chassis rails in a little bit further than I did with the axles from the Devastator. So this servo's a little bit too tight in there. So I think I'm going to have to cut off these mounting lugs. So now we should have more room to actually fit it in there. People sometimes laugh at me for using hot glue on these builds, but so far it's the best glue that I've found. You can almost stick anything to anything. You can pull it off again if you want to. You can readjust it. It dries quick. And you can even colour over it with some paint to make it look the same. So people can laugh. It does the job. Alright, there we go. Servo's all glued in. Not the neatest of jobs, but it is functional. So next, what I've got to do now is sort this front here out. I'm going to cut this down and then glue it back together. So there we go. The front end's all glued up. Oh, look at that. Steering's all working. We got power. We're getting somewhere. So now let's remove some of these cable ties here. And I'm just going to tidy up the cabling, and then next we're going to try and mount some wheels. So next I'm just modifying these wheels. So I'm drilling out the centre of these toy wheels that came with the Spin Master monster truck, and I cut the tyre off of the original wheel that come off of the RGT Adventurer. I've tried boiling these off, and I've also tried getting them off with acetone, and it just doesn't work. It just destroys the rims. So then I can plonk that in there, fill it up with hot glue, bolt it on, and we should be good to go. So next we need to make a little plate for the battery to sit. So the perfect part is the little battery compartment door thing here. So I've drilled a hole in each corner. So now we can just zip tie that into the chassis like this. There we go. Boom! I run out of black zip ties, so these blue ones I'll have to do for now. But guys, it is coming together. Alright, there we go. It's starting to look like a monster truck. So I've got an elastic band on the back here just to hold the battery on. So now, let's see if it works. Guys, it's alive. Guys, for a brushed motor, I'm actually pretty impressed. It handles pretty good. It's got plenty of power, and it probably feels more powerful than the first one that I did. That's probably because these wheels that are on this one are really, really heavy, whilst these ones here are a lot lighter weight. I don't know, which ones do you prefer out of the two? Now, obviously, the brushless one over here, this one's got way, way, way more power because of the brushless motor. But maybe I'm going to give this a go with these wheels on it, just to see how I like it. So I've just done a little bit more work to it. I did it off camera, but what I did is I glued this rear piece back in. I've narrowed it slightly, stuck that back in. I accidentally cut the rear bumper off. When I was cutting off the excess plastic here, I slipped with a knife and I cut the rear bumper off. But I used it to my advantage. I narrowed the back now, so it looks a lot nicer. If we have a look at the other one over here, look, the back's a little bit wider and then it kind of sort of narrows in. So it does look nicer, apart from the glue, that obviously doesn't. And then on the front here, I used a piece that I cut off from here, glued it in the front there, and there's a couple of screws in here, look. So these are the original screws that held the body to the cage. I reused them. I put a little bit of sort of rubber or silicone, whatever you call it. I cut a little piece off and then slid it over the screw just to hold the screws there so that they don't fall out. And then on the body, I kept the original stock body mounts the same. On the front, I cut them both off and then I re-glued it back on in the middle here on the centre. So when we put that on there, look, that one lines up with there, that lines up with there. We'll screw it on and boom. So all that I really need to do now is tidy it up a little bit, pull off a little bit of the excess glue. I could spend ages and do it really nice, but I'm lazy. And then I can just get a black marker pen and just colour in all this hot glue so it's the same colour roughly as the chassis. It's just going to make it look a little bit nicer. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. You know, I'm going more for function over beauty, but that will do. The other thing that I did on these two here is that I cut out the windows and I put a bit of Lexan in the front window here. On this one here, I think I'm just going to leave it as it is. Because, you know, this is supposed to be a bit of a cheaper build, and if you guys have got to go out and buy yourself a bit of Lectern, it's going to put the price up a bit. So I'm just going to try and keep this build as basic as possible, but still at the same time make it as cool as possible, working with what we have. Boom! There we go, check it out. We're finished. Obviously, guys, I could have done a little bit of a neater job, but as I said, I'm lazy, or, you know, maybe not so much lazy. I've got to still edit this video. I've got loads of other work to get on with. I just haven't got the time to sit there and spend hours making it look perfect. But functionally, it looks perfect, and body can go on. So let's give it a quick blast and see what this thing can do. Ah, tumble wumble. Can we save it? No. So there we have it, guys. We've got 3 Monster Jam trucks up and alive and working. So next I'm going to be building the Monster Mutt. I'm not fully sure what specifications to do it yet. Maybe we'll do another brushless one. Maybe another rear wheel steer. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But considering this one was a cheap build, and I've used as little parts as possible, I mean, it performs really, really well. I mean, if it had rear wheel steer, that could maybe sort of make it a little bit nicer, a little bit better. But it is going to cost you a lot more money. So, for a cheap build, guys, I mean, it went together really easily. I'd love to see what you guys can come up with. Don't forget, there's a link up here if you want to see these two being built. But I'd love to see some of you guys come up with something, maybe use some parts from something completely different, and just see some videos and see how your creation can perform. So I'm going to get another one built, and then we're going to have some little mini Monster Jam competitions. I'm going to build some more jumps. I'm going to build a little stadium down there, or maybe in there. I know, I'm a big kid. I need to grow up, but life's all about having fun. So I will see you over in another video.